Hey everybody, Ed Carvajal here with your Sunday submission for MMANews.com. If you like what we're doing here at MMANews.com, make sure you click like and subscribe to the MMANews.com YouTube channel. Click the bell notification for interviews and things like this that come up where all these videos live over at the MMANews.com YouTube channel. If you like the stuff that I do, make sure you give me a follow on Twitter at Carbazel. And today I'm joined by an OG from the MMANews.com family.
Yes.
Fernando Quiles, oddly enough, was my boss. Now he's like a tag team partner of mine. So I said I was trying to get him on for last week, but I mean, he and we've worked on site events together and stuff like that. So I'm happy to have Fernando join me as he's back in the fold with the MMANews.com. Fernando, man, big night last night. I mean, I don't know. I talk about the 7 takeaways from my 7 takeaways piece on the site, but there's so much to take away. I'm going to bring it up here just because it's like a reference list for me. But what stood out to you, man?
Well, I think that besides Jamahal Hill's grotesque arm, I think that the Brandon Moreno-Davison Figueiredo fight was very interesting. First of all, obviously, congratulations to Brandon Moreno. I mean, that was just a fantastic performance. Yeah, he did exactly what he needed to do. But I don't know if you feel this way, but Davison Figueiredo looked way off. He looked like he just almost didn't show up for the fight. And it's totally different from their first fight, because in their first fight, he was engaging from the very beginning. And that's pretty much what happened throughout. I think that part of Moreno's performance in the rematch, part of it you can attribute it to the fact that, he tasted the best that Figueiredo had to offer, his most powerful punches, and he was able to withstand them. So he had more confidence in the rematch to just, go in. But I think in the first fight, Figueiredo was much more aggressive. He looked far more hesitant in the rematch. And I think part of it, I mean, it may have to do with the weight cut. Figueiredo has a history of really tough weight cuts, so maybe it is time for him to go to the bantamweight division. But I find it very interesting that, Figueiredo was saying, in the entire buildup to this fight, that the reason why he didn't finish Moreno in the first fight was because he was sick.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to use that excuse at all, it would be for the rematch, because he certainly looked like he wasn't on point in this rematch, whereas Moreno was. So I thought that was very interesting. It was like the tale of 2 different fights for me.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm 100% with you. Actually, when we do the predictions or picks on MMANews.com, when I picked Moreno to win, it was because of Figueiredo. There's always something with him especially as you lead up to fight night. I mean, and then with that last fight, the first time they fought, I thought he was done with that. But then, like you said, afterward, the reports came out that he was ill or battling illness or something. So there's always something, and I'm not trying to knock Figueiredo, because I actually liked him as I did a whole thing. One of these Sunday submissions, I did a whole thing when he won the title, the whole God of War thing that he does with the red stripe in his hair. Like, I was on board with Figueiredo, but I mean, there's always an issue, and just the fact that, I mean, I'm very I never complain. Like usually when there's a draw, you want to see another round. But that first fight was one of those fights where I was just like, you know what? I'm not mad at that being a draw. So, but something about Moreno, I knew he was going to win. I had a feeling it was going to be a decision. I didn't know it was going to go to submission. I didn't think Figueiredo, I thought Figueiredo would have been more defensive about it. But like you said, he seemed off last at the scale with like a minute to go. And I know in the post-fight press conference, too, that was one of the questions that Dana White had to address. And he had a lot of his answers to a lot of things where I don't know for folks that don't watch the press conferences.
Oh, yeah. And we'll see what happens. That's the Dana White specialty.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. But really quick about it, I mean, the first before we jumped into, I mean, for me, just before we leave the Moreno thing, that was the main event for me. I mean, like Adesanya Vettori worked out as I kind of figured it would work out, but I want to go back. These clips that they put up, I'm gonna play it really quick just to, you can see Jamahal Hill's. It's apparently, which was a dislocation, not a break. But I just hate the timing of the clips because they don't show the whole sequence that leads up to the finish anymore. I guess to get folks to buy the pay-per-view. But as we're watching the clip play there, the thing about the Jamal Hill just tweeted just before we went live here and started recording that he did not tap. I thought I saw a tap when he was trying to either it was a tap or he was trying to force the knees down to get to drive into him.
It definitely looked like he was pointing to his arm and the referee when it was happening.
Yeah. So yeah, there's some type of, I mean, both that and Craig was signaling to the referee when it was happening. So I mean, I don't know if you saw, but there's folks that cover MMA regionally around there. That referee Al Guinea, I put his name in the article where this is being written about. Apparently, he was pretty well known as not being the best ref, and during the post-fight press conference, that was brought up to Dana White too, and he was like, "Oh, so he's the Steve Mazzagatti of Arizona."
Yeah.
But I mean, just stuff like that. It makes it, in combat sports, you got to really have somebody that's on the ball. And I know that they're saying that Al Guinea, the referee, might even be a black belt in jiu-jitsu. But if you're not a practicing jiu-jitsu practitioner, no matter what your rank is, things start to leave your mind and you don't know what to pay attention to. And I think apparently he's got a history, but that was stopped way later than it should have been.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is just the classic case of, when you have a state that just isn't used to putting on like these big fights. I mean, usually you get some questionable decisions when it comes to some of the officiating and some of the judges who are there at Octagon side. So, I think it's one of those classic cases where you have a state that brings on their local referees who may not have the best reputation. We've seen it in Texas as well. It's just these things just always seem to happen. And while you don't want to say that it's a part of MMA, because you don't want it to be a part of MMA, I mean, this thing doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon.
No, and it's funny. That's an interesting point that I forgot to include in this piece when I was writing, because I write it usually during fight week and as we lead up to stuff. And that was one of the thoughts that crossed my mind was, with COVID and everything and the logistics of going to states that are opening just to be first. I mean, you are going to state like, how often do they go to Florida? Excuse me, Arizona. Sorry, I'm choking on my coffee.
So you drink more coffee?
yeah, to wash down the coffee. But that's I feel like that's one of the smaller risks, because you can't have Herb Dean and your go-to refs. I mean, referee every single event that happens, because they do more than just the UFC. So you're logistically, you're gonna pull one of these local guys, and like you said, if you're going to a state that's not used to holding these like Vegas level events, then you're gonna run the risk of stuff like this happening. I don't know what else stood out to you. I mean, the main event kind of went as I predicted. What was your thoughts on the 5-rounder with Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards? There's people for, people against it, but I don't know. After it was over, what'd you think?
I really thought that Diaz had a good shot at winning just because it was a 5-round fight. And, with Leon Edwards was doing in the beginning exactly what I, expected him to do. He found his range. He had great timing. He was attacking the leg kicks simply because Diaz has a history of being susceptible to the leg kicks, right? Because of his boxing style, right?
Yeah.
For me, Diaz didn't get going like as sooner than I expected him to. He only got going at the very end of the fight. And, that's when he pops you, with that classic 1-2 that he pops you with. And it's almost the same thing where like guys, they always like to rear back and then they get popped with it because of Diaz's reach and, his great boxing ability. So that's what happened with Edwards in the end of the fight. It just goes to show you, man, Diaz is a freaking zombie. Like, it doesn't matter how bad you cut him up or what, he's not really hurt because that scar tissue is just, it's just going to give way. So, he's always going to look like a zombie. He's always going to look bloodied up. But, I mean, he's always going to be a threat. And, Leon was able to, hold on there at the end. So, and it shouldn't take away from his fantastic performance, to be honest with you, because it was one-sided almost all the way through until, Diaz does what Diaz does and tries to, rally. But My main takeaway from both these fights are this: Leon Edwards is who we thought he was, and Nate Diaz is still a star, and he's probably always going to be a star until the very end.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like it's weird. Like leading up to it, I was kind of. I mean, I the outcome. I said it's going to be doctor stoppage, or it's going to be, a decision for Edwards. But I think the star power of Diaz comes from his, him and his brother are like the modern day samurai of MMA, in my opinion, and that this killer be killed attitude. And I mean, when he loses by decision or a cut. And I know him and his brother are susceptible to being cut, so I thought it was going to be one or the other. But that rally at the end, I mean, I don't know about you, but I live alone and I watch these fights alone. But there's very rare moments that I stand up and cheer by myself in my apartment, and that was definitely one of them when he landed that shot that rocked Edwards. That's why Diaz gets 5 rounds, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction when he landed that shot was, "Here we go." It's like one of those things where you just like, can Leon survive, or is this going to be another one of those, crazy Diaz wins? And it ended up being the former, but still an awesome moment.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I didn't write on this website though was my co-host that I do the Coast to Coast Combat Hour podcast with, Matt Hawkins. He was in house at this event, and I was messaging him about one thing a lot of folks seem to notice was how, I don't want to say ungrateful, but the crowd was kind of, I don't know, do they not do a lot of MMA in Arizona?
Yeah, they booed for like unless like the person was like Diaz, right? If Diaz got in the clinch, they best believe that they'd be cheering. But if it was like anybody else, they just booed like right away. I thought it was crazy the amount of times that they booed Vettori for trying to, take Adesanya down, which is exactly the strategy that he was supposed to try to do.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because you're in a fight, like not even a minute or 2 minutes, and you're booing a grappling exchange. It's like, go watch a boxing event if that's what you're into. But look, at the end of the day, look, the fans they pay their money, they pay their ticket. I'm not going to sit here and whine about them expressing themselves.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you especially UFC ticket prices, you kind of bought the right to boo. So
and you bought the right to buy booze along the way, clearly.
Yeah. So the one thing he told me really quick, I feel like I have to mention it, is he was sitting next to Matt, my podcast co-host, was sitting next to a group of allegedly Chase Hooper's friends that booed Chase Hooper every time he tried to do jiu-jitsu. And I was just like, well, how do you not know your friend? If he's your friend, don't you have an inkling of his game plan for fighting? So I don't know.
I tell you, it's just it's wild. It's like sometimes they forget that they're there to watch mixed martial arts.
Yeah. But I don't know if there's anything else that stood out to you. Again, I don't want to go over all the takeaways like I normally do, because there was a lot of fights that led us into the weekend, and we have to get into Bellator and PFL. But
real quick, I'll just touch on the main event real quick. I think it's the story that like Marvin Vettori just gave Israel Adesanya too much space. I thought that he was going to be more aggressive. He was going to bring more pressure, set up the takedowns with punches. And, one key thing about Israel Adesanya is that you notice with his movement, and he's always moving around the octagon, but he makes sure that his back is against the fence. It's very different. Because we would always say, oftentimes when a guy is, he has trouble with takedowns, you're like, why is your back near the fence? Israel Adesanya's back is against the fence a lot because A, he knows how to cage walk when he's near that cage. And B, when you're grappling with Israel Adesanya and his back is against the fence, there's almost no one better at fighting the hands and breaking away. Yeah. So Israel's smart about that. He knows where he is inside the octagon. I feel like if you're going to have success with Izzy, in the grappling department, you've got to take him down away from the cage. And that's what Jan Blachowicz was able to do. Yeah. So I think in the future, I mean, if you're, Robert Whitaker, this is probably something you're going to have to take into account.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good point that you bring up too, because if the takedowns that Vettori did get were far from the cage. So that's a really good point that you're making. And the thing about, I mean, listen, if anything, Adesanya, in a lot of his interviews, he talks about all the reading and he's not just a physical muscle memory type of fighter. He's very cerebral in what he does.
Yes,
And one of the things, that he obviously took a lot. I mean, he even gave him credit at last night. Again, he talked about the Blachowicz fight and where gave him credit where credit was due. But one of the things in martial arts, there's the popular saying, either you win or you learn, meaning when you lose, you learn what to fix.
right.
And he definitely took those lessons from the Blachowicz fight, because you saw how he pulled guard, made his guard tighter, still got to the cage so he can get up and get away. But one really interesting thing, if you notice, when he always went out to his right when they were in the clinch, he almost I don't want to say he because there's no fish hooking allowed, but he almost hooked Vettori on the right side ear and got the underhook to spin his head to face his body, twist his spine in a way that would open up the hole for him to escape out to his right. And he did it. I forget how, I lost count, but if you rewatch the fight, you're gonna see during the clinch he has the right underhook and he does that, and he shifts the upper axis of Vittori's body to twist to create that opening where he just and escapes out to the right. So that's a really good point by you, because I mean, he obviously, like you said, he used the cage to do that, and the two takedowns that Vettori got were from the middle or far from anywhere Israel Adesanya could use a cage. You know what's funny about this weekend? I mean, this is a good way to segue into Bellator. Josh Thompson, when he was doing commentary on Bellator, I actually, as long as I've been watching MMA and training martial arts, but I've only trained or been in the cage like 1 or 2 times in my 27 years of training. But Josh Thompson pointed out that there's a lot of fighters. The reason why cages are in gyms and stuff is so they could use the bounce of the cage. And that's something we saw, like Adesanya using the cage to escape, but the guy putting the pressure in, they mentioned it last night, and I only just started hearing it at Bellator 260 over the weekend when we were watching the fight with Justin Gonzalez when he picked up his win against Taiwan Claxton. I think Josh Thompson mentioned it there because they pulled him off of commentary and put McCarthy when the main card started, but I'll leave that where it is. But yeah, I mean, Bellator 260. So I'm just using that to segue into Bellator 260. But I only just discovered that night when Josh Thompson mentioned it, and then we saw guys doing it at UFC 263. So I know Bellator 260 wasn't the most exciting card. The things that stood out to me, I mean, obviously the main event. I know you said you paid attention to the new champ over there at welterweight. So what were your thoughts on that fight?
Very much, heavy into the grappling that Amosov was, because, we really haven't seen Douglas Lima neutralize quite like that. Not at a welterweight, where he's just not able to get anything going, on the feet, and he was just taken down for 5 rounds. And, Amosov at this point, like he's, what is his record at this point? 26-0, 27-0?
26-0.
One of those two? Yeah. So he's been creeping up for quite a while now, and Bellator obviously had high hopes in him. So my biggest thing is just for him to be able to do that to Lima, and Lima not getting offense going at all. It just goes to show that when it comes to you could be flashy all you want on the feet, which is why if Amosov gets Michael Page next, that's going to be very telling, because Page is known for his striking, but if you're getting taken down by Paul Daly, imagine what will happen with Amosov. So we're gonna have to see if Michael Page worked on some things, but very just like with Khabib, sometimes wrestling is king. So if you're at a high level,
no, absolutely, man. I mean, listen, the thing about the welterweight division with not for nothing, Bellator 260, I just got to say, was a very wrestling heavy night. I mean, there was
Yeah,
so
Aaron
much.
Pico earlier
Yeah.
that night too.
Yeah, there's so much to take away. I'm just bringing it up here from the site because we got the results up from everything that happened with highlights. Um, listen, the Aaron Pico highlights. I just wanted to bring up. He went for this anaconda like 4 times.
Yeah, I thought it was more like 50. He was really searching for it. He wanted it bad.
And I didn't get to ask my question, so I mean, I was tapped into the Bellator like post-fight interviews, and I didn't get to ask. I was going to ask him if that was like a new move for him because as often he was there. I mean, that's a great move for wrestlers, just for folks that don't know grappling. Like the anaconda is great, especially because if they wind up in a position where somebody shoots in on them and they get on top, or they spin off the back from trying to take the back, which is pretty much all the ways that Pico tried to hit this. It's a great move for them, and the timing was a little off for me because they were trying to wait for certain fights to finish or whatever. But Pico definitely coming into his own. I mean, that was even Scott Coker said it at the post fight press conference that for him that was the fight of the night. I mean, never mind the striking. They showed this body shot. I mean, that kid must hit like a ton of bricks.
Yeah,
But
I mean his striking can be pretty nasty too. But I'm glad that he's utilizing his wrestling. It's all about mixing it up because obviously early in his career, keeping his standing was only going to work with certain guys. Then other guys like Henry Corrales were just going to total him.
yeah.
And Pico was a little bit awkward when he tried to grapple with Adam Boris. It's almost like he didn't truly like believe in like his abilities at that time, but now he is developing. He's developing like many people hoped and expected that he would. Time will tell if he can do this at an elite level, but it's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm looking away because I'm looking at the screen to because I'm watching this replay. So the thing about the anaconda submission and the darts when you cinch it up, I know they kept telling him to put his leg up, but usually you want to walk your legs towards the opponent's legs to fold him into himself. That helps to cut off his breathing and stuff, and force a tap. So that's all squeeze on Pico's part, just to show you the type of monster he is. So that yeah, and that's yeah.
And you notice too, Ed, I'm sure you're very well aware of this. Like when it comes to wrestlers, right? Sometimes you don't need the best jujitsu. It's like sometimes the strength when it comes to those chokes are just enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're going back now. I mean, there's I forget who he arm triangled, but OG Chael Sonnen, one of his arm triangle submissions, he does from mount, which you hardly ever see. But that's from, like you said, that wrestling strength. Like it's all squeeze. I mean, jiu-jitsu is about leverage, but it does help to have that, the level of athleticism and years of training. And one of the things I asked Pico on media on the media day was because if you saw his last victory, how he got a little crazy and in the guy's face, and then he pulled himself back and was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So I asked him, I'm like, are you still doing that mentally with your training and stuff like that? And he said yes. Like he's like, I tend to, and that comes from being a lifelong competitor. He was like, I tend to sometimes just go balls to the wall, and he credited the team at Jackson Wink to that they're helping him kind of reel back and look, but look, maybe not go so, animalistic or whatever you want to call it. But I mean,
and I think that goes beyond the fights themselves too. It's more like taking the fights. Pico in the beginning of his career took some fights that he had no business taking. It was just way too soon for him. But when I interviewed him back in Bellator NYC, he said that I asked him what do you say about the people who say that you need to grow a little bit before you take these fights? And he says, you know what, Bellator just gives me fights and I just go. I'm a competitor, just like he told you. So I think he's really reining that in.
Yeah. I mean, he's so young too. So even if he picks up a couple of more losses, it's not like he doesn't have time to grow. You just got to worry about obviously brain health and things like that. But I mean that's obviously the fight that probably one of the better finishes of the night, especially since he took it into the final round and just dominated all the way through. With the remaining time, I know we have to talk about the Professional Fighters League, PFL 4 of the 2021 season. Clarissa Shields' debut against Brittany Elkin. That's a really big moment for the promotion. A lot was being made of it. But before we talk about that, I just got to say, if you didn't watch PFL, Loughnane versus Tyler Diamond was fight of the night. They don't do that over there, but those two gentlemen definitely need some credit.
Yes,
but,
for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, so what did you make of the main event and how everything folded on PFL 4 Atlantic City?
I mean, it just goes to show you that, you may be the best female boxer. And for those who aren't aware of Clarissa Shields, she is an undisputed champion in 2 weight classes. She's won the undisputed title at middleweight, and she's the current undisputed champion at light middleweight. So this is somebody who's widely considered to be the best female boxer on the planet right now. There's also Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, who you can argue, who also is into MMA, Amanda Serrano, and she recently picked up a submission win.
Yep. So I was going to bring that up, but go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. I think I stole your thunder. So with Clarissa Shields, I mean, it just goes to show you could be on the top of your game in boxing, but when you go into the world of MMA against a relative unknown in Brittany Elkin, she was struggling with those takedowns, and she was almost like a deer in the headlights on her back, and she really didn't know what to do, except, she was able to, escape an armbar at the end of that second round. I think I attributed it to 2 things. Maybe you have your own take, but I think it's a combination of, you're slippery at this point, so it's probably easier to escape that armbar. But B, Clarissa Shields has strength. Clarissa Shields is a strong athlete. So, she was able to break free of that. I think what ended up happening with Brittany Elkin is, people were like, why is she staying in that, position where she's just holding on to Shields? It's just like, yeah, you try getting hit by a world champion and in boxing, and you tell me how that feels. She was just staying in that same position, basically holding on for dear life. I think a combination of that was she was also tired, Brittany Elkin, and Shields just, pounded away on her. I think it's the combination of those 2 things. So I guess in summary, right, it's like you even though you're on top of the world when it comes to boxing, if you transition to MMA, it's a whole new beast, and vice versa.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's you mentioned Amanda Serrano. If you want to track a boxer that went into MMA and did the most correct path, it's her. She went into she went and competed in grappling competition. I think she did a lot of grappling industry stuff here in the Northeast. I already knew that her guillotine was super tight from seeing the footage because she posted it herself on her own social, and she's not getting the following from MMA fans that she deserves or whatever, because when you look at the comparison of like, you have Anna Hulaton, Heather Hardy, Holly Holm, obviously, who just imposed her striking into her game to get her wins. But Serrano kind of went the route of, let me put myself in the most uncomfortable situations I know I'm going to be in so I can get used to it before I even do my first MMA fight. And we're seeing those dividends pay off for her in her MMA fights. I know, like, Shields just went straight to one of the best camps and trained. One thing about Shields I'll say is, as somebody that's the level of athlete she is, and coming from being an Olympic competitor and all the accolades that you mentioned, her calmness from competing as long as she has showed when she was in trouble. I mean, there's one point in the first round where she works her way back to the cage, and her corner's telling, and she nods to acknowledge, like, I got it, and to acknowledge what that she's listening to her coaches. She didn't do that really at the end, but I mean, that's where, like, when I first watched it, after a while I was like, come on, Clarissa, you got to listen to your coaches. But then, when you think about it, at the end of the day, it's just one fighter versus another fighter in the cage, and no one else is in there. They have to go with where, I mean, if she felt like she was winning, and like you said, I mean, she even said it at the post-fight press conference, her right hand, she knows her right hand is what ends fights, and she felt those landing on Elkin. I'm not sure, like, Elkin was the senior person for MMA. The one thing I'll say with the remaining time we have, she it didn't seem like it dawned on her to bring her. She kept bringing her, and I know in MMA that's a thing, but when you have, if you're the advanced ground person, you want the space to swim in your ocean, which is the ground. And she kept bringing Shields toward the cage, which is what she wanted anyway. And it looked like Elkin didn't realize that until like that armbar attempt that you mentioned. But I mean, that's one thing I noticed at the face-offs, that Shields looked like she was noticeably stronger than Elkin. But I mean, she's only going to build and learn from here. I know she's going to go back to boxing because she's not in the season for PFL, so she's not eligible to win the $1 million prize. I mean, this is for her to build her record, similar to how they did Kayla Harrison, and we see how that's working out for her. So I'm looking forward to more Clarissa Shields in MMA and Amanda Serrano, because if you didn't see that submission that Amanda Serrano got, to know what I'm talking about, her guillotine is money. She's like the Alistair Overeem right now of women's MMA with her guillotine. So
I mean, it was almost like John Jones, Lyoto Machida style.
yeah, that high elbow guillotine. I mean, usually when you see the upper torso shift like that and the elbow go up, the choke is in and the fight's pretty much over. Anyway, that's our time for a Sunday submission for MMANews.com. Make sure you follow myself and Fernando. Fernando, I didn't get you didn't put your stuff up here, or did I not put the brand up? I mean, did I mess that up? Yeah, maybe I did.
It doesn't matter. It's at FQJ MMA. Catch me. I'm back on MMANews.com as a writer. So and it was only 9 months that MMA News was able to keep me away.
Yeah, and he's firing off content like nobody's business. So yes. Make sure you give Fernando and MMANews.com a follow. Make sure you click the thumbs up for this video when this video lives on YouTube. Click the bell notification for all the interviews from James Lynch and content like this. Give me a follow on Twitter at Carbazel so you can see all the stuff that I toss out on the interwebs. And that's it for this Sunday submission. Fernando and I are tapping out. We'll see you next Sunday.